Get her out of there.
Go, Delta, move, now!
She's not here.
She's gone.
God damn it.
They're not on the train. He's one guy.
Jason, please don't hurt me.
Over my words. What did I say? I said, leave me alone. Leave me out.
I did. I swear, Jason, I told them that I believed you.
I'm gonna ask you some simple questions. You're gonna answer me honestly, or I swear to God, I'm gonna kill you.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 224 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm your host Becca, and as always joined by my fellow movie fan co-hosts Chris and Dave. How are you both?
Good evening, folks.
Supremely good to be here, thank you.
Supremely good.
Supreme.
That's right, it's the Diana Ross story tonight.
Yes, hope you're feeling supreme, and and all other associated puns.
Actually, it's because we're all eating chicken supreme.
Well, I'm not, 'cause I'm vegetarian, so.
She's eating, like, I don't know, cauliflower.
Corn supreme.
Cauliflower supreme or some shit.
I don't think I've ever had that, even when I did eat meat. I don't think I've ever had that chicken dish.
I don't know if I have.
Listeners, tell me if I'm missing out. I don't know.
Like chicken supreme. If you go to a restaurant, chicken supreme's quite expensive, right?
Is
it's
it?
like it's a luxury option. Yeah, they've managed
Is
to.
that why it's called supreme?
It just sounds like something you get out of a packet, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, probably it does.
It's like chicken tonight.
Yeah, it's the budget option. Try it out.
That's very 90s, isn't it?
I think
That's
so.
a very 90s option.
Chicken isn't actually that expensive, is it? So why would it be that particularly expensive? I don't know.
No, here in the UK we've got the Platinum Jubilee coming up, and there was a thing on the, one of these magazine shows that you have on TV about Coronation chicken, and how, like, obviously in the 40s and 50s and everything, it was more of a luxury dish because chicken was really quite expensive, and obviously throughout the years it's, you know, also the chicken and the meat and the ingredients have actually become more widely available, so obviously prices come down and people are able to try it in their own homes. So yeah,
salmon was super expensive when I was a kid.
Well, yeah, this is it exactly. And now it's still a little bit pricey, but it's not like, you know, a delicacy that you bust out for special occasions sort of thing. It's something you can eat more regularly.
Oh, you'll see what you don't know what I bust out on special occasions. Yeah, so
well, I know, like lobster or something.
That's our review of
that's
our review of local chicken dishes. What are we covering tonight?
So yes, tonight we are reviewing a second in the Bourne franchise, the Bourne Supremacy, starring Matt Damon, Frank Potente, just very briefly, Joan Allen, who is amazing, Brian Cox, Julia Stiles, who was also amazing, Martha Sokas, and before they were famous, roles from Carl Urban and Michelle Monaghan, whose name I've spelt with 3 L's. Right, the score. The same as last week as well, with music from Moby, with this track Extreme Ways playing over the end credits. Script by Tony Gilroy. Yeah, oh yeah, that's the one. Yeah, sorry. And directed by Paul Greengrass, and released in 2004.
Paul Greengrass, I was really trying to think, did I know him from anything before
Heartbeat.
this? Heartbeat, exactly.
Yeah, Heartbeat.
He did do Bloody Sunday. That was like a TV show, though. I mean, it did premiere on a big screen.
Known for these, well, he's obviously
that was a James Nesbitt.
Wasn't he?
Yeah, it was
He wasn't really known for these kind of films, so it was a bit of a left field decision.
Yeah. So, I mean, Bloody Sunday's really good. It's got James Nesbitt in it, who's probably still best known for Cold Feet, but those of you not from this country, he was one of the dwarves in the Hobbit films, but one of the more minor ones.
Yeah.
He was in the Hobbit
Well, I never
films.
knew that.
Well, that's because he is one of the more minor ones, to be fair.
He's the Irish one.
Yeah, he's the Northern Irish one.
He's the Northern Irish, yeah, no, fair enough. I never knew he was in those films. Oh my gosh. When we come to review them, I'll be like, I didn't know he was in it. I didn't know they were in it.
Well, you won't, because we just told you.
No, I know.
Although the lead dwarf was best known for Spooks, wasn't he? And he was also the guy who who killed the guy who made Captain America.
Oh yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I only recently found out that one of the guys from Flight of the Conchords was in it, and I didn't do that until a few years ago. So,
Was in what? The Hobbit?
or Lord of the Rings films, I think.
I didn't know
Don't
that.
ask me which one.
Well, I don't.
We'll come to them
remember
in due course.
Well, we've got a Flight of the Conchord series. Seeing Michelle Monaghan in this, she's got slightly more screen time, but it's very like seeing Gerard Butler in Tomorrow Never Dies. To call them a key constituent part of this film is a bit of a misnomer.
Yeah, it's more like a cameo.
But she's not famous enough for a cameo. But I suppose Kiss Kiss Bang Bang was the next year.
Yeah, that would probably be like her sort of breakout role, I suppose,
And then
as it were.
Mission Impossible 3 was like the year after that. But I was thinking, surely
and
she
Gone
was,
Baby Gone as well. That was like
Oh yeah, Gone Baby Gone. Yeah.
that was 2007, and I'm sort of thinking, was she literally not known in 2004?
I wasn't aware of her being in it. Like, what's the chap who was in the last film? Who's who's in Tarantino films? He was in The Shield. What's his name?
The one who played Vince Mackey. No, he's not in it, is he?
No. In hang on, I'll get his name. But it's like, you know, it's only because like now you recognise him that he stands out. Before you'd just be like another like actor.
I think it's the speed she hit it big. In that, like, I wouldn't say she's an A-lister now, but she's a comfortable B-lister.
Yeah.
And
she got really famous really quickly. I mean, similar with
yeah,
Carl
in
Urban
that
as well.
she only did 4 films before this. One of which was the Diane Lean film Unfaithful, which has also got Josh Brolin in, I think, and I think Viggo Mortensen. I'm not even sure on Josh Brolin. I might have got that wrong, but anyway. And Viggo,
Walton Goggins. That's what I was thinking of.
Walton Goggins, that was it.
I'm actually thinking of A Perfect Murder, which was based on a very similar plot, because that's based on Dial M for Murder. Sorry,
Yeah, I was going to say.
but it's only about a 5th film, right? And then the following year,
So that was his other Hitchcock remake.
yeah. So the following year, she did Kiss Bang Bang, which probably made a star of her, and you'd love her as Santa at your party. And following Mission Impossible 3, then Gone Baby Gone and The Heartbreak Kid, which she was the lead in with Ben Stiller, and then it was Eagle Eye the following year when Shia LaBeouf was a thing, and she's a star. And she wasn't the year before this. Funny, she was in Mission Impossible 3 because she shares a birthday literally to the day with Kerry Russell, who was in that film.
Oh, fun fact, folks.
That was when I was researching women around my age, you know, for research purposes. And,
Reaching out to them, hello.
I was just saying, we were just thinking what was possible in an alternate universe. No, but so she's to say she's in this film is factually accurate, but in the same way that it's fair to say Gerard Butler's in Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yeah, you see her on screen for like 5 seconds.
Yeah, a few times though, unlike Gerard Butler, who actually had a line but appeared
Yeah,
once.
he had like a scene, one line, and that's it. And it's like, oh, shut up, buttwad. So,
I think of this era, I mean, again, Carl Urban, I was thinking, it's so low-key and he's speaking with an accent, so you think, is this before he was famous? You know, because it's after The Lord of the Rings. I suppose...
it's like where... Cause I've not seen this film, like, probably since release, unfortunately, and I was like, oh, Carl Urban, really? You know, and I was like, totally forgot that he was in it, and obviously it was one of his, you know, coming off Australia or New Zealand TV show, done a few films before this, and this is kind of one of those roles that kind of really, you know, brought him to attention. And
Well, he was in Lord of the
kind of
Rings
went from
before this, wasn't he? So I think that's why I
yeah,
know.
that was the big film, definitely.
He was. I'm trying to remember what his role was in it, though.
He was one of the, you know, the horse
Yoma?
people.
He was the horse.
He was the horse.
No,
he was the horse.
Uma.
He was one of
He
the.
went into casting unzipped, and they said, "Yep, you can be a horse."
He was one of the Rohan.
Oh yes, he was. That's
he
right.
was same as Bernard, whatever he's called, who was the king.
Yeah.
I always go to say Bernard Breslin, but he was the guy from the Carry On films.
No,
Not-
isn't the guy from Boys from the Black Stuff?
And not Bernard Lee.
Not Bernard
no.
Lee. Oh, no,
Or
I don't
Manning.
use- No, I would only
It's a
talk.
job Yossi
I wouldn't
Hughes.
take Bernard Lee's name in vain.
When we do The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings movies, we'll go through all the cameos, you know, because obviously they're star-studded. Everybody was in those films.
Yeah,
It'll be
except
quite interesting to look at all the bit parts, all the cameo roles, all the, you know, all the smaller roles, you know.
smaller roles, I suppose.
I
yeah.
don't mean obviously Hobbit, that would, like all those sort of like minor characters, because you know, get some really big stars playing quite minor roles, which I think is really interesting. So.
Well, that leads me almost on to my next point, just about actors in this, in that it's always very difficult to predict who becomes a star, and it isn't necessarily about whether you like or dislike them, because I always found not to sort of not even. I don't want to call him what Kermode calls him, but Orlando Bloom, I find bland. I think he's correct on that. But you would have thought after Lord of the Rings, young, good looking, was on sort of calendars and magazine covers and shit like that. You thought, well, he'll be a star. And he's still known, but he never became a star. I suppose a little bit like Miranda Otto. She turned up a few years later in War of the Worlds and not a lot else. And I think
it's tricky, isn't it? I mean, obviously we've got Top Gun out at the moment, and John Hamm's in that. You kind of think, well, after Mad Men, he would be amazing. He'd be everywhere, and you don't see him in nearly enough films. I mean, that's his choice, or you don't know quite what's going on there.
There is
but it's just like,
where he got,
it's quite interesting to see what happens, or
I
you can never predict.
I always thought John Hamm would have been a good alternate for Ben Affleck as Batman.
Yeah, he'd be quite cool as Batman. Yeah. I just think we need to see him in more films and TV, please. So, John Hamm's agent, get on with it.
The thing is, I think with John Hamm, he's perfectly fine, but that's it. He's just perfectly fine.
Have you seen Mad Men, Chris?
I haven't. No.
Check it out. It's really good.
I'm sure, but I'm sure he's like one of the things that he's suited for. But I think what I'm saying
quite literally suited for.
Yeah.
If you watch Mad Men, you'll see why I can see him as Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with you.
Whereas I mean, talking about Top Gun, and maybe we'll cover Top Gun one day. Maybe Chris and I will have enough to do a summer special this year. Who knows?
Do it.
But we haven't been able to in the last couple of years. But I did go to see Top Gun Maverick, and he's not well served by that role. He's not bad in it, but it's a pretty one-dimensional, quasi bad guy in that it's just a guy in a position of authority that will clip the wings of our hero. So he becomes like the villain by default, I suppose.
Well, he doesn't like Maverick.
He's like a passive antagonist. He's not like
That's the best way to put it. I mean, there is no villain in the film. There's two sort of passively, the other one would be Hangman, who's an asshole till the very end of the film, but you can see that coming a mile off. But I mean, I'm very positive about it, but that film does not do him any favors. If you go and see like Mad Men, I think he could do most things because he can do humor as well. But the point I was linking to this film in that whatever happened to Julia Stiles?
Yeah, I would like to do the same. She was amazing because she did a lot of like teen movies as well.
Well, she did 10 Things I Hate About You. She did an
amazing remake.
And
after probably about 10, 15 years ago.
She did 10 Things I Hate About You, and then between she's done other things, but things that stand out to me and people might remember now is obviously she was in The Bourne Identity, and between that and this, she did Mona Lisa Smile, which was a Julia Roberts.
Yeah, that was a really good film.
It was Julia Roberts' vehicle, and it did fairly well, as I recall. Now I might click on the link to it and find it did no money, but I remember decent marketing around it. And then the year before the Bourne Ultimatum, which they only made it so they could release it on the 6th of the 6th of the 6th, was the Omen remake.
Oh gosh.
And there kind of it stalls. She's got like a role in Silver Linings Playbook, but that's 5 or 6 years later. And then there's a load of stuff I haven't really seen. Now, it doesn't mean that.
I think she was known. What was that dance film she was in? I'll try and find it. It's somewhere on the filmography.
Well, she's in a film called Save the Last Dance.
Yeah, that was it, definitely.
Hey, MTV Movie Award for Best Kiss.
Well, this is it. She did a lot of teen movies, a lot of, teen romance films, everything in sort of mid to late 90s. Obviously, really, really popular with that kind of people of my generation kind of growing up.
I've never watched the MTV. I used to watch the MTV Video Music Awards, right? I never watched the MTV Movie Awards because by the time I got really into films, I was too pretentious for that. And all I think of when I see MTV Movie Award for Best Kiss is Tropic Thunder.
Oh, not Spider-Man, no.
When at the start they take you through the Robert Downey Jr. characters, it's a trailer for a film starring him and I think it's Tobey Maguire, and it takes you through his filmography. The star of an Academy Award nominated for Chaplin, BAFTA Award nomination, and the winner of MTV Best Movie Kiss, Tobey Maguire.
No. Oh yeah, she was in Dexter. Oh my god, how could I forget she was in that? Oh my god.
I never watched Dexter.
What? You gotta check it out. It's really good.
I'm watching NYPD Blue at the moment because I found that on Disney Plus. Then I'm watching Only Murders in the Building, the Steve Martin vehicle.
I've got to check that out as well.
I haven't got right. I'm trying to get back to
read the books. They're quite easy reads.
And what else is it I'm watching at the moment? There's several things. Honestly, yeah. There's too much. There's too much TV.
Yeah, there is a lot going on, isn't there?
You cannot watch it all. I've kind of given up on a lot of because I think because some of it is like it's the hype's kind of gone for some of it. So
Yeah,
like,
you missed that hype train. I mean, it's like we've currently got a new series of Stranger Things. Obviously, it's going to be the last series. I think I haven't.
I checked
watched,
out
like, I watched like series one and
like
two,
it.
but then the third series I just dropped off entirely.
yeah.
I dropped out series 1, half a dozen episodes in. I thought, well,
This
the
is
the
it.
fact,
I mean, I've only
the
just
fact
got around
this
to
looks-
watching the Obi-Wan series.
I've seen
There's
that.
a new
I
Chip and
watched
Dale
that
film
today.
out this weekend. I just got around to
I got
watching that.
funny looks because I was watching it at the gym. So I had it on my phone, so I'm there doing weights, watching like Darth Vader and that. Spoiler alert: if you haven't seen it, Darth Vader's properly appears in
Whatever
episode
floats your
3.
boat.
So now I'm watching that. What else am I watching? What else is on at the moment? I've just finished Moon Knight. There's something else. Miss
Oh yeah,
Marvel's
Moon Knight. I
coming.
need to see that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but there's something else I'm watching episodically. What else is coming out weekly?
Oh god. Yeah, there's so much out at the moment. NYPD Blue? No.
No, I watched that years ago, but it dropped on Disney Plus, and it's one of my favourite shows of all time. When I say that, the first season and a bit is among my favourite of all time. Not really after that, to be honest. It still stayed sort of a superior cop show. But
No,
it's
yeah, it's
that
hugely
first
legendary.
season arc, which, like, it was before proper episodic. It was when TV was a lot more episodic. It had this whole story going through the first series, which it melded with the sort of episodic as well.
Yeah, you had to watch it, didn't you, for each week?
Yeah.
For it to really kind of make an
And
impact.
then I get films through from sort of Set the Tape to watch. I was watching a 1920 fucking silent film today for them. I can't remember what else I was watching. Miss Marvel does start soon, I know that. Oh, Better Call Saul finished last week.
Ah, that's the one.
It was the mid-season break. It comes back in July. So, yeah, I've been watching that as well. So
There's a lot of TV. It's like, where do you find, where does one find time for all
And
this?
that's not taking into account my wife might like to watch something else. So I'm watching quite a lot of like MasterChef Australia and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's it.
Or even take the dog for a walk, get out and do your day job.
We've gone through who's in this. I guess I don't want to say an awful lot at the outset, in that, except that this is where the hype sort of starts. But it's not necessarily reflected in the results. In that the first film came in at, I think, 60 or 65 million. Can't remember without looking, but I know I said it in last week's show. So if you're listening to these in sequence, you may remember before me. And it took about 214 at the worldwide box office. This is 75 and 290, which is not a massive upgrade, just considering there was quite a lot of hype around this film. But maybe I'm misremembering, and the hype was around Ultimatum, and it was more anticipation for this. Like, the Empire magazine, several page story inside and talking about it and why they were bringing it back.
Yeah, like if you, no, Twitter wasn't around, but if you were on Twitter, it was probably one of the things like it was hyped up around there rather than amongst
Well,
the
it's
public.
a bit like if you judged it by social media and stuff, Snakes on a Plane should have been like one of the highest grossing films ever made.
Oh god.
Because there was so much talk around it, and it did okay because we're a relatively small community of people talking. Now, what I want to say is it's doing better. It's a fallow year for Bond on the normal cycle, as was then, in that they hadn't even got rid of Pierce Brosnan at that stage.
No, we had a couple of years before we saw Bond on our screens.
I don't remember how good a year for film it was. It was the year of Troy, if I remember correctly. It was the year of Spider-Man 2.
Oh.
What else came out in 2004? Do we remember?
Well, actually, I remember the summer itself was a bit crap.
I think that's what I'm getting at. I think
Yeah,
it's a bit
it wasn't
of a
great, was
quiet
it?
year.
Because I think the main big film was Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man 2,
And
yeah.
apart
And
from
I
Which
that,
was quite good though. It got, was
I don't
like the high
remember
point of the
much
early
else.
series.
and apart from that, you had like King Arthur.
Which was terrible.
I mean, obviously, Shaun of the Dead was this year, so but that was like
Again,
early. That was early.
That's a small film. That's basically spaced fans going to see it at that stage.
You had like films like Collateral, which
Die Another Day.
the maturing.
Die Another Day did not come out in 2004.
No, I know.
Hand your Bond fan card.
The Maturing
Oh, yeah,
Candidate
very
remake, Man on Fire.
None of these are massive films, though.
No.
I mean, Man on Fire's quite got a big following though. It's been quite
It
popular.
was popular. I'll give you that. But I'm just
Kill
looking at-
Bill 2. Well,
Kill Bill-
Kill
that's
Bill
quite good.
2 was early in the year.
yeah.
But I'm looking at it now. Top 10 films of the year. How many of these were super anticipated?
I Robot again. That's
Shrek 2. This is highest grossing films of 2004, are based on worldwide gross. Okay. Shrek 2 at number 1. Now, Shrek 2 was somewhat anticipated, but Shrek was a bit of a breakout hit. I think it was almost like, wow, this sequel's better than the first one, and it had legs. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which is actually the lowest grossing Harry Potter film.
No, it's not it.
Spider-Man 2, The Incredibles.
Ah, that's good.
Again, it is, but it's a new IP, which tells me there's a little bit of like Pixar's hot right now, but also it had legs.
Yeah.
Next film, Passion of the Christ.
Oh, of course, because that's released over the Easter weekend.
Well, in stateside, a lot of Christians went to see it several times as well.
And it's probably panned quite a little bit.
Well, what I'm saying is, again, that wasn't a film everyone sort of got excited.
No, everyone got
before it
behind.
came out. Meet the Fockers at number 7. Not even Meet the Parents. Meet the Fuckers, the very shit sequel.
Careful.
Troy at number 8. Shark Tale, which was a very, very disappointing Will Smith sort of animated vehicle with Robert De Niro in. And at number 10, Ocean 12. That, to me, is a slightly anemic year.
Yeah, it's full of, like, very, very kind of sequel heavy, like existing IPs, some new IPs trying to break through.
Team America's in there as well.
The sequel overload that we have at the moment.
Team America's not on this list, but I am looking at highest grossing, and I can't imagine that would have been amongst them.
No, it's 04.
No, it was 04.
Really?
You're absolutely right. I mean, in terms of quality, not too bad at all. I mean, there's plenty of films in there that did pretty well. The Aviator, Sideways, which was a film that shockingly few people saw. Layer Cake, Vera Drake, Ray. The Jamie Foxx film.
Oh yeah, biopic.
Which was really good. Closer, which I liked.
That was a really good film.
Closer was good. Clive Warren was in that. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is still one of the most interesting films I've ever seen.
Van Helsing.
I think if we ever do a Jim Carrey, we'll have to do that.
Honestly, Kate Beckinsale. I nearly said Kate Blanchett, and then I nearly said Kate Winslet. Kate Beckinsale was so bad in that. I thought it was a parody. Her accent was so bad.
It was all over the place.
It reminded me of Heather Graham's character in Bowfinger.
Oh, God.
Kid, you forgot your gasket. It's like that. It was
pretty bad.
Terrible accent. So it's a weak year, and against that background, the Bourne Supremacy only shows a fairly modest improvement on the first. So I think what we're saying is next week, strangely, is the breakout, which retrospectively makes this an even bigger hit.
Yeah, that kind
Again,
of...
we're still in the DVD boom. We're still in the DVD boom. So the Bourne Supremacy did very well at home, on Sky, and foreign equivalents. This is pre-Netflix. Well, it's pre-Netflix as a streaming service anyway.
I think we probably still had the disc rental at home.
Well, we had Screen Select here.
Screen Select. What was it called? There was Amazon, and then I can't remember the name of it.
You had screens. You had several, and they all got bought out by Screen Select, and I think Netflix may have bought them out in the end.
Yeah, but then it was Amazon for a while, wasn't it? What was
Amazon
it
had a service as well.
Oh, it'll come to me. It'll come to me.
Yeah.
At the end of the podcast, I'll be like, it's this.
So, yeah, if people wanted to see a film again and they didn't want to wait a year for Sky, they bought or rented the DVD. So this film was a very, very decent hit. But bear in mind, it's 18 months, 2 years on from a Bond film that did 150 million more. It's a couple of years before a Bond film that's going to do 300 million more. So when you remember these films as absolutely setting the agenda of the decade, it's more in influence, and by the time you get to the third film, when everybody had to see the Bourne Ultimatum to see what was next. Do you guys see it when it came out?
I saw it when it came out, and unfortunately, like many films, I haven't seen them since. So it was a refreshing experience to see this again today.
Yeah, I saw it at the time, and I remember specifically sort of watching the screen sort of like kind of move and thinking, this is sort of handheld.
Shaky cam.
But again, like the Bourne films haven't really been ones that I've revisited. Even though I'll buy them and I'll own them, I've never really found the urge to kind of rewatch them.
Well, I don't watch The Lord of the Rings that often, and I think, although we couldn't talk about more different films, we're not doing. I don't think we got Lord of the Rings next. I can't remember if it's Lord of the Rings next or
the Westerns.
I
will check my list, but it's within the next series or two.
I've got written down here, Bourne, Tolkien, then Westerns, but we can always switch it. We can always mix it up.
Tolkien, right? So if it's Tolkien next, there won't be much crossover with this, but I think the one point of crossover, I've always said that whilst they made an effort to finish the Bourne Identity in a place that it would have had to have been a critical hit for them to care. But if it had been a critical hit but a commercial flop, in that there might be some respect on my work here in years to come. They wanted it to be fairly self-contained. But I think the fact is, once you've seen them all, and you know that obviously Marie goes early in this film, it's very hard to watch the Bourne Identity self-contained. So I think that means you're in for 3. And they're rather exhausting films. They're not super long, but they're in pretty perpetual motion when they get going.
Yeah, they're quite frenetic, aren't they? And you have to kind of, obviously, in the films you can kind of put on in the background. You really got to pay attention.
That's what I think it is, Chris. I think it's just you're in for one, you're in for the all, and how often do you want to watch 3 hours of shaky cam car chases and running and there's
You've got to be in that mood.
And also there's not a lot of levity in them, and I wouldn't say I find them heavy. I think they're very good, and there's, I wouldn't say there's humour in it, but get some sleep, Pam, you look tired, or get some rest, Pam, you look tired is actually levity. It's almost like a little slightly humorous note to finish on, even though no one's looking for a laugh.
It's more of a kind of like badass Bourne.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is that there's not a lot of levity in these films. But it wasn't a complaint I had in mind to put out when we recorded tonight.
Yeah.
And when I raise it for films, I normally raise it as either a complaint or a limit. So, for example, I talk about Matt Reeves's Apes films as lacking levity. Certainly the second one, and I do mean it as a minor knock on the film. A very minor knock on the film because I like it, but it is but. With this, it's not a but it might explain why you don't go back to it very often. But it's just that it's got an exhausting tone to it, and I haven't revisited them as much as I would have thought I might have. And that's the same with Lord of the Rings. You know, Fellowship finishes in. I remember I'd never read Lord of the Rings, and we'll talk about all this in a few weeks' time, but I'd never read the Lord of the Rings when I went to see Fellowship. And it finished, and I was sort of like, I was a bit like, I knew it was a trilogy, but I was also like, they're leaving it there. And that's because I had no idea really of much about the story. And I think, so when you watch Fellowship of the Ring, you're in for 3 films, and it could be 11 hours, depending on what version you watch. And I think there's a bit of that here.
Yeah, I mean, it's always especially with Lord of the Rings, or films like that, because it's almost like The Godfather to the extent. It's like, you're not just, not everyone's just gonna just slap it on just because they feel like it. It's like it's
got to concentrate.
It's a bit of a commitment, isn't it? It's like, so if me and my wife are like decide, my wife decides, I'm going to actually watch Lord of the Rings today. It's like, well, that's our day. But that's us for the day, isn't it?
and also, I mean, it's like, if there's 2 of you as well, with Lord of the Rings, it's one of those films that, because there's so much of it, sometimes I've wanted to rewatch them, and I will be rewatching them, but I'm always like, my wife has said she'd like to see them and like to see them again and thinks she's seen them all, but she can't quite be sure. But I always feel a bit guilty because I think if I put this on in 2 hours in and you're like, they're still walking and like, only got another 9 hours to go, sometimes you're a little bit like, do you mind? Are you sure, when you have someone else to think about as well? And I do think there are films that you just can't put on there. The Godfather's a good example. We did watch all of those within the last 6 months. I remember saying to you when we recorded our reviews, which were 4 or 5 years ago now, and I said to you, I hadn't seen them for 4 or 5 years, and funnily enough, another 4 or 5 years later, I have watched them again, and it was great because half hour in, I was like, "You okay with this? You enjoying it?" And she was wrapped by it, and then watched all 3 and really, really loved them. But yeah, if you put something on in half an hour in, they're like, this is going on a bit. You're like, okay. And I think the other thing as well is sometimes there's a social element to a film if you don't live on your own. There's like, we've got the day off, the night off, the weekend off, the week off. Let's have a few drinks and watch something tonight. Well, if you're going to have a few drinks and watch something, you don't really want to watch The Godfather. It's not like a pizza and beer film, is it really? But yeah, I saw this on opening release, and I don't think I watched it opening night. I don't think it was a race to see it. In that, I've got very few films in your life where you have a mental image of yourself sat in the theatre. There's a few where I just remember being sat either with someone or by myself, and it was a certain time of day, or other things happened that day, or the film stood out to me. I don't have an image in my mind, but I've got a feeling in that I think I went into a fairly quiet screening, which tells me back then I didn't live that far from the cinema and I wandered in one afternoon. And I don't recall being that blown away from it by it. I'll go into first thoughts now, actually, in that for me this film was really, really good. I mean, I had very few reservations about it. I think Matt Damon was just as good, if not better, in this, because he loses somebody in this, and these snippets are coming through to him, and some of the plotting was really good. The him being in the wrong room when they go and attack a room, because he's trying to get into a specific room, and we'll get to that later, I thought was really good. The car chase, I think, might be... I've got a soft spot for the mini chase in the first film, but I think the car chase in this film might be the most visceral. And again, I'll make a point about car chases next week, because I don't think they're anything like as fast as they look. But this was the most crunching. I think Carl Urban certainly was more intimidating than Clive Owen, as was Martin Sokus to some degree. He's the sort of person you would almost cast as a sociopath, even though they're kind of not. Brian Cox is just so much worse in this. Pamela Landy, another Joan Allen character I loved. But I think the point is, it did feel a little bit like more of the same. It didn't feel as self-contained as the first one. And so there was nothing about... What I came out feeling was that Bourne as a property had been enhanced by this being added. But I didn't have the same response to this entry on its own that I had to the first one. The first one was much more of a pleasant surprise, much more self-contained. On rewatch, as I come back to it now, actually I think this is the better film. Even standing alone, I think this is the better film. I actually think it's smarter plotted. The first film is very well plotted, but it's him wandering around going, I don't know who I am, and slowly having bits revealed to him, and it's very clever. But the whole framing of him here is, I think, a step beyond that. Little set pieces like him going to a certain room because he's got fragments of memory, and the lack of a full memory is actually what saves him. And so, whilst it was sad to get rid of Frank and Patent, I think they played off each other very, very well. Indeed, I felt almost a bit more. What's the word? I felt a bit more danger here somehow, which sounds odd because they're chasing him in the first film, but in this film he's almost striking back at them. But yeah, I felt that the organisation he was working for was more outwardly dangerous than they were the first time round. They were after him, but that's because he's a loose end, and you do think that there's a chance here that he may be able to explain to them what's going on somehow and save himself. Here, if he walks in, he's at it, because there is something very, very rotten at the heart of this organisation. And so,
he's being used as a he's being used as a
he's
scapegoat.
being used as a fool. Yeah, but obviously he doesn't quite know this to start with. I think all of that is great, but flaws and human flaws in it. In that, if they hadn't framed him, if they just framed, they frame him, but then try and cut him off again as a loose end, and it's like he's the other side of the world. Frame him, and then just leave him alone. Jason Bourne did something, and then make a half-assed attempt to catch him. But that's human frailties. I think Brian Cox is brilliant because Brian Cox can do anything. I mean, he played Daphne's dad in Frasier. He can do very, very funny as well. He's the sort of person. He's an alternate casting, but I noticed. I noticed it just dropped on Netflix today. In Bruges, he could have played the Brendan Gleeson character in that quite easily. And that's all I wanted to say. The film as a whole, I think now, on reflection, is probably a stage further developed from what we got last week, and therefore better. But a bit like The Empire Strikes Back, you might prefer the first one because the second one's less self-contained. But even though when I came out the first time going, I think I liked identity more. The very fact that this gave me more, much like an Empire Strikes Back, left the series in like really good health after I'd seen it. What about you guys?
Oh my god, yeah, I always struggle after following Dave because it's just like there's not really much more you can add, really. This is a long time ago, you know, kind of like finishing uni, starting a new job, like going traveling, stuff like that. It's quite a long time. Obviously, I saw this film at cinema when it first came out. I think because I sort of read the book, the first film, and obviously the being quite different as well. But I think also from production point of view for this film, I think it was just at the time it was just intended to be, you know, we weren't intended to have all these sequels and it to kind of be like a sort of mini franchise of what it turned out to be, obviously with the spin-off TV series as well. I think, you know, they just obviously set out to make the first one, and then they said, you know, obviously it did okay, so they greenlit the sequel, and then ended to tie everything there. So when obviously we get the next film, you know, next week, they were like, oh crap, what do we do? You know, you have to work around this epilogue. But yeah, I think I remember going to see this one, and I think for me it is, I'd agree with you, David. It's kind of one of those sequels. I mean, the first one, you know, it was brilliant. It was very innovative, and it certainly kickstarted this kind of more gritty, in inverted commas, realistic kind of action film genre that we see today, and obviously, as we did kind of argue, sort of kickstarted, you know, seeing it a through line through to the Bond reboot. Had we had maybe like a campy 60s infused, you know, Bourne thriller, maybe we would have gone back to like Roger Moore 60s style, 70s style of Bond film. Who
I'm
knows?
just picturing her drowning in the car and him coming up to the surface, crying for a moment and going, wait a minute, I'm single again.
or some quip, you know, you never know, it could have gone completely different, and we wouldn't have had the gritty Daniel
Personal now.
Yeah. Or he got swims to the surface with like a seagull or something, you know, a seabird.
Have we just set a record? Because we've just mentioned the Playboys again. Have we set a record for the most mentions of a short fucking comedy skit ever?
Hey, it wasn't that short.
Except perhaps the like dead parrot or something.
Yeah, probably.
It wasn't that short. I mean, it was like, you know, a good 6 minute, good 6 minute sketch.
It's very famous, you know.
Everything on 69, my favourite number.
I mean, it is just such a good skit, so
it's brilliant. Unfortunately, when you look it up, it's all like it's like standard definition now. You'll find it on like YouTube, but it's like off a video cassette that was.
It looks quite grainy.
Was
now,
already a bit degraded, you know.
It doesn't look great. I don't know if there are any HD versions of it that exist anywhere, but yeah, you try and look it up now, it does kind of look a little bit like it's very SD.
But then it suits the time it was trying to parody as well, so
it does. That's true.
If you've randomly restored the 1992 comedy skit The Playboys from episode 2 season 2 of Harry Enfield the television programme, please write to us at expectustotalk@gmail.com.
Or hopefully, you know, maybe we can tweet. We can tweet them. I don't know if he's on Twitter or not, and say, "Oh, did you know? Is there any chance of releasing the series in HD?"
Yeah.
Or maybe Suggest Network. They might like to restore it. They do a lot of HD restorations. I know they're working on the Jerry Anderson back catalogue at the minute. Just had a nice HD. No, we haven't. A nice Blu-ray release of Stingray. So hopefully Thunderbirds coming next in the correct aspect ratio. Very excited.
Thunderbirds is coming in what? Sorry.
Well, we don't know. This is just a rumor.
What's the rumor?
Hopefully they are working on a HD Blu-ray remaster of Thunderbirds, and like on home release for years it was an incorrect aspect ratio.
So Thunderbirds are going blue.
What's on BritBox at the minute is actually in. I mean, it's in like, you know, it's a really good version basically, and that's in. I think that's
in your pocket, or are you just pleased to see me?
Yes, there's Thunderbird 1 in your pocket.
I've got to ask, right? I know we're going well off the topic, but what aspect ratio was it in, and what aspect ratio should it be?
Oh gosh, so I've got it. I'll tell you at the end because I've got them here somewhere.
I want to know now because I'm sure I've borrowed the like.
I've got to dig it out. Hold on.
In the bath. I would have thought it was like 4:3 aspect ratio.
No, so it's basically kind of like letterbox mode, where you've basically got like it's letterbox, so you've got like.
So it's been strips. Incorrectly cropped.
It's been incorrectly cropped basically, and the only place you can see it is if you import the Japanese DVDs. I do believe it's shown on the correct aspect ratio on the Japanese home release. And there's any home releases over here so far have been incorrect. But I do believe the version on BritBox that is currently being streamed is correct. But I can't remember if that's HD or SD.
So is the DVD version effectively SD?
Effectively, yes.
Just upscaled a bit.
I did actually have it, but I gave it away. I'll just see if I can dig it out. I've got my Anderson pile right here. Hold on. Oh, this is going to take some time.
Amazon pile.
Anderson pile. I've got a pile.
From Amazon Prime.
Oh god. No, so a few years ago, I won a competition to win the entire back catalogue.
How long is this back catalogue? Because you say entire, it's not that massive, is it?
Since 1959. I think the only thing that wasn't included.
Do you mean all subsequent versions of Thunderbirds as well, like Thunderbirds Are Go? Because Thunderbirds, the TV series, wasn't that many episodes, was it?
No, so I think the first series was like 25, 26. And then obviously got cancelled halfway through, series 2.
Right.
Lee Grade basically said, no more. Go make Captain Scarlet instead.
So Captain Scarlet came on instead, did it?
Oh my god, this is turning into the offshoot of the Jerry Anderson.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Bourne's just a chase film. We'll cover that in a couple of minutes.
I know we do go off a tangent, but this is one hell of a tangent. We might have to do a bonus content about this.
So that only ran for 32 episodes as well.
Well, if we ever do it, but so like.
I mean, Komodo Mayo, they go off on talking about all sorts of nonsense. So, I mean, it's the thing that like podcasts do.
It's what we do, and forward on a bit and just see if we're still banging on about Thunderbirds if you don't like it. Otherwise,
I don't think it tells you.
If you don't know, nearly 7 years in, we tangent, then balls to you. Right. So anyway,
what were we talking about?
I don't know. So when was Joe 90 then?
I much prefer Joe 90 to be honest with you, the Thunderbirds.
Well, so that was towards the later end of the run. So obviously you had oh god, sorry, you want to go all the way back to maybe sort of late 59. This is where my knowledge kind of starts failing me a little bit. Roberta Lee, basically kind of a bit of a polymath, try to write the theme tune, sing the theme tune, write, direct, produce, do the voices of, that kind of thing with Twizzle, I do believe. There's only one episode of that which survives, and it's on YouTube. It's very grainy. And then that was obviously made through a company called AP Films, Anderson Provis. And then obviously they broke away and made his own production team, and then came up with things like Four Feather Falls and 5XL5. It's all gonna fail me now, I'm afraid, all this nerdism. And then obviously you got like Thunderbirds, Stingray, Captain Scarlet, which are the big three. And then obviously you got developments in puppetry as well. So like with Captain Scarlet and with Thunderbirds and Stingray, you've kind of got like really obviously the cartoony looking characters with like the big eyes and the big heads. Yeah. And then with shows like Captain Scarlet, you kind of start to move towards more realistic proportions. And then you have sort of things like obviously with J90 as well, which came towards the end of the Super Mario Nation run, and Secret Service, which kind of not very successfully kind of mixes live action.
I hadn't heard of that
with Super Mario Nation as well.
Everything really.
And that was towards the end of it, and then obviously you kind of get into the live action, which is obviously Space 1999, UFO, The Protectors, things like that, for example, as well. And then towards the 80s, you get like a resurgence of what was Super Macromation even, with like Terrorhawks, which I love because it was kind of around the same sort of time that I was born, like late 80s. And I kind of think
late 80s, she's cut a bit off her age.
The Jamie Anderson as well, so.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you want a complete history, go and listen to the Jerry Anderson podcast. I highly recommend it. It's fantastic. It's been running for last 3-4 years now. I think since 2018, 1920. But yeah, nearly 4 or 5 years now. Hosted by Jamie Anderson and Bridget James, who was in Space Precinct, who was in like one of the last live action series.
That was the one with Simone Bendix in it.
Simone Bendix, yeah, that's it, definitely.
I never watched it. I saw a photo of her once, and I remember 25 years later.
I never kind of really watched it at the time because that was towards the end of like my fandom, and I think it was around that sort of time when obviously it was coming up to the anniversary, so they showed like all like the big three, like Tea Time on BBC, that sort of thing. And then I think on Sky maybe is when they showed it, because at the time it was like the most expensive TV show that had ever been produced. And yeah, I think I seem to remember it on Sky and been thinking, there's no puppets or whatever. It's some of it was like animatronics, for example. It was a little bit not too sure, but somewhere there's a compilation DVD that you can buy, starring Shane Rimmer randomly, in the pilot what turned out to be like Space Police, and obviously that would eventually become Space Precinct, for example. So that's quite interesting. But yeah, no, it's co-hosting that with James Paid Officer Oren underneath all that makeup, so he's pretty cool.
I've only seen one episode of Thunderbirds all the way through. I was lent the box set and I watched the first one, which was Trapped in the Sky, which I liked. With
It's amazing. That's my favourite. I love
the one
it.
caveat that it did feel really long.
It is quite long, for example. But then also then you got Thunderbirds Argo from 2015, which was the CGI live action blend from Weta.
Doesn't that ruin it though? It being CG isn't half the charm. It's being
No, it's kind of split the camp down the middle, really. Like a lot of fans that I talk to are similar to myself. Like they really love it. I think it's done really faithfully, and you can't really see the join so much. But then obviously there are the the diehard purists. The same with Bond. Same with any sort of fandom who might have grown up with the original and thought, oh no, it's not as good.
Yeah, there are Bond fans who literally don't like any of the same films I do.
Well, no, that's part of fandom. It makes us all diverse, but it includes. Oh God, I was going to say Buzz Aldrin, but that might not be true. But he appears towards the very end of the series as Jeff Tracy, amazingly enough. But also, oh God, Matt Zimmerman is in there. He pops up as a character. Obviously, he voiced Alan Tracy in the original. It has a ton of celebrity voices. Bob Monkhouse.
How in Thunderbirds Are Go? Oh, that's 1966. Sorry.
No, that was it's obviously the new series that I'm related to. But yeah, Bob Monkhouse randomly. He pops up in the film.
That's why he was so tanned. He accidentally varnished himself.
He varnished himself.
So he said, "You're going to play a puppet, right?
I'll have a go at that."
Varnish on them.
He's a Ron Seal man,
Yeah.
Oh God, this what it says on the tin.
So Chris, what do you think of the Bourne Supremacy?
Well, I mean, I never watched Thunderbirds, so so
literally, oh my God, if any of like my underfan nerdy friends listen to this, my information is so dead wrong. It's literally just pulled off the top of my head, so I can only apologise. But literally, go and listen to that other podcast if you're a fan. If you grew up with that kind of stuff, even in the 60s or the 90s, and you want to know more, definitely go and listen to that Joe Anderson podcast. I can highly recommend it. I
want to know more, but I can't watch everything. That's the problem.
No, it's too much. And also, I can recommend at the end of that podcast as well. If you follow YouTuber Chris Dale, he does really amazing sort of comedy videos, and also he'll take you through like backstories of various Anderson shows, about how they were made, and he also produces these primers about like if you've never seen Joe 90 before, he's done a primer video on it telling you all about it, how it got made, plot points, things like that, for example. Various mashup videos, like there's a hilarious one of Captain Scarlet, which is set to I Like Trucking from Not the 9 O'Clock News, really randomly. But he does a show called The Randomizer, where he sits down in front of a random episode of an Anderson show, and chats about it, and basically gives you his thoughts and little production tidbits and what happened behind the scenes and how it was made, things like that.
I haven't even had time to get to the new Bond.
So yeah, that's a separate podcast all in its own. So that's
when did the new Bond come out? 5 days ago. With the
I think 3 days
with
ago.
The Mind Kill. I haven't got to that yet. So like, it's just too much. You can't watch and like listen to it.
No, this is it. Yeah.
So I watched Obi-Wan Kenobi at the gym, and I watched the end of an episode of NYPD Blue I was watching while I was like getting changed. So that's a strange image. You in a gym, like ready to get in the shower with Sipowicz interrogating somebody. So yeah,
in his shirt sleeves.
It can get for every. He gets results.
He gets results.
That was Homer, wasn't it?
And then he pops up in one of the Psycho sequels. So there's a series that we could do right there.
Is he called Toomey or Tuvey or something like that?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he's like the manager before
he's running the
back.
hotel.
And he ends up he gets it in the eye, I think.
And of course he played Homer Simpson in that.
He
film
did. Evil Homer.
Starring Dennis Franz.
Oh, Pupper.
Yeah. So Chris, what do you think of the Bourne?
That was like the biggest tangent we've ever gone.
Well, we even got back to asking him and still went
home.
off.
I think it was my fault. I mean, personally, I'm much for Captain Scarlet myself. The thing I remember most about those Jerry Anderson things is like how it went from like puppets, and when I have close up of someone's hand, it was actually like a live action someone's hand.
It's real hand. Yeah, they use real hands occasionally, and sometimes real bum.
and what?
A real butt. Sometimes you see a real butt. Obviously wearing trousers.
Yeah.
But no, sometimes close up ET are like lots of real hands and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's just cheating, isn't it?
I always found that a bit unsettling, to be honest with you. The one that I always found like, wow, how did they do that as a kid was Land of the Giants. Well, it's really obvious.
Oh god, yeah, that's
really
amazing.
Obvious how they did that, to be honest. They just built big things and stood a long way from stuff.
I quite enjoy those Ray Harryhausen movies with like the really early kind of stop motion. I think that's really cool. I know that's obviously now seems like a little bit hackneyed, but I just think it's incredible, you know.
Yeah. So, Chris, what do you think of the
Anyway,
yeah. So let's actually get to Jason Bourne. The Bourne Supremacy.
Oh
The Bourne Supremacy. Yeah.
Second one, Chris.
I'd rather enjoyed this one.
I can't believe this. I do apologise, listeners. Oh my god.
Yeah. What's I remember? So lots of shaky cam. No. To kind of pick up what everyone else has said. I think this is where it kind of starts to like pick up, step up its game, find its footing a lot more. I think generally, as Dave alluded to, the story I think is a lot more appealing. I think while it's well done in the last film, but the idea of having your protagonist be like not knowing who he is isn't as is a problem you have to overcome, which is something you don't have necessarily here. Yes, there's loops in his memory, but he knows all intents and purposes who he is to a degree. You know, he's got his sense of bearing, and it is essentially he's got a motive of revenge as well, which is also very universally understood. You can go like, right, fine, well, they killed his bird, so he can. To put it broadly, yeah, it's personal now.
That's not my manner.
No. Yeah, they killed the woman who he loves, or like his basically.
Well, the one he's been doing for a bit anyway.
His chance for a peaceful life, you know, is like, you know, kind of like, oh, well, you know, one good thing he had is now just been taken away, and now it's like, right, okay, well. Now he's on a bit of a rampage. So I think it's a lot more. The action scenes are a lot. There seems to be quite a lot of action scenes. I was quite surprised. I didn't remember that it seems to be quite consistent, and they seem to have a lot more. There's a lot more to them as opposed to last week, which is a bit more smaller scale. This seems to up the stakes a little bit more.
It seems a bit more. It's a bit more country hopping, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got more kind of like memorable villains as well.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you got Brian Cox in the first place. He's basically taken on the Chris Cooper role.
Chris Cooper role, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, I remember years ago, just try not to tangent too many more times, but I remember when Brian Cox did, there used to be a TV program on, I think it may even have been the late 80s, where they would do, like, they'd get famous actors to, like, do an acting workshop. Michael Caine did one, and I know Brian Cox did one. And I remember reading, like, the newspaper the next day, and it said, Brian Cox is growing more into Albert Finney as he gets older. It's like, I think Albert Finney's in next week's. He has grown to look more like Albert Finney as he's got older. But
yeah, he's kind of turning into that. I kind of get the impression you guys weren't really fans of Brian Cox in this film.
No, I'd say quite the opposite.
I was going to say he's kind of known for really kind of like slippery sort of characters or really sort of complex roles. I think he's quite
everything.
Yeah, he's literally.
And in fact. I mean, Brian Cox, I think it was either today or yesterday was his birthday. I do look at IMDb most days to see his birthday is. So I think it could even be today. I just can't remember if it was yesterday or today. I looked. And this is 18 years ago. Probably shooting 19 years ago. And there's something so diseased about the soul of this guy that I remember when I watched it in the cinema thinking, feeling a bit worried for Brian Cox. He looked like someone who would like have a heart attack sometime soon. And 19 years on, he's had 19 years of good health. I don't want to go any further than that with our track record.
No, oh gosh. No.
Yeah, so I don't want to say he continues to be in good health. You know, but, at the time of recording, we have to give loads.
Please carry on.
But he just there was something about the guy that was just.
It
Sweaty.
is his birthday today on day of recording.
He's 76 today. So filming this, he was probably about 57, and there was just something pasty and old and fat and weary. And I'm not fat shaming there. I'm just saying the guy did not look in good health. And
it's Jonathan Pryce's birthday today as well. Fun fact.
Let the mayhem begin. And Troy emphasises is screening at the PCC in London soon.
That's what he would say when he's had his birthday cake.
Yeah, the mayhem begin. Had too many gins.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, John Price. Legendary.
It's a few, but there's always a few birthdays every day. Obviously, that are noteworthy on there. I noticed a couple today, and I didn't notice Jonathan Pryce for some reason.
Oh no! I remember going to see him on the stage. I think he was Fagin in Oliver years ago, back in the 90s. Very good he was too.
Tom Holland. It's Tom Holland's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday!
Jonathan, Amy Schumer, Jonathan
Price,
Malin Monroe.
It would have been, and Reddy Auberjonois from Odo from.
Oh really?
Yeah, it would have been. He obviously passed away.
Yeah, he passed away recently.
Powers Booth.
He was in Avengers movie.
Andy Griffith. That's it for the super famous ones. Oh, Gareth Edwards. You know him very well. And Alanis Morissette. And so anyway, Chris, what do you think of the Bourne Supremacy?
I think we need to do a new item on the show, celebrity birthdays.
Yeah.
Whose birthday is it on the day that we record?
Yeah. Well, we could do that, but all that will expose
date us horribly.
How late we are editing.
So to carry on, because Brian Cox is because one thing I noticed about the last week that like the Chris Cooper role was kind of like on edge, a bit like the walls closing on him. Here it's Brian Cox and he's like all nervous and on edge and trying to cover his tracks and trying to be like all like nervy and thinking, oh shit could hit the fan here kind of thing. Just to kind of like interesting how the two kind of like crossed over into whereas like I suppose last week Brian Cox is quite sort of authoritative and kind of like clean it up, I don't care, and just sweep it onto the carpet, whatever. So it's like you definitely got more memorable villains. You got more of a clear kind of plot. There's obviously there's the corruption. There's the sort of the backdoor kind of like thing that gets more explained, about the corruption, about paying off this guy to assassinate this guy, that plot as well, as well as like the actual CIA is trying to get to the bottom of all this.
But that's the point. You've got them sort of investigating themselves effectively, but you've also got someone who is, I think, she sells you immediately. She's straight as a die. I think that's what I liked about her in The Contender, that there's an element of doubt about what her character's been up to, and they play on that doubt. But I think as the audience, you're supposed to be, no, I believe her, and I believe that if there is something wrong there, it wouldn't be her fault or anything we should hold against her now. And Jeff Bridges in that film is making the right decision. And here, I think it's important that there's somebody with the right intentions at the centre.
Yeah, she's playing it kind of formal, kind of like, but then she starts off the bat like she's introduced when her man gets killed in action, and like and her like investigation just goes up the wall. So she's like, right, what the fuck happened? So there's it's instantly you kind of know where she's coming from. She just wants to get into like, what's gone on. Who's this Jason Bourne who's apparently done it? What's going on here?
What's clever about that though is we always talk about sequels and the difficulty in making them self-contained, particularly when these three films are one story, really. These three initial films from the Identity on. She's a way in for the person who didn't see the first film. Yeah, there is that. Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but yeah, there is that. No, nor have I till you said that, and I'm like, actually, yeah, that's it. Really, she's a way in.
Yeah, that's true. Actually,
films that can disguise their drive the plot on while they're doing it, as well as slightly disguise the fact that there's an element of exposition always like win points to me. I love Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker, but the actors do stand around and explain the plot to each other.
Yeah, there's a bit kind of Basil exposition there, isn't there? Really,
And they've largely avoided it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is fantastic. It really does kind of drive things forward. It's one of those films like it's always it's constantly moving. Obviously, there's a little bit of nuggets, a little bit of plot that's kind of driven through in the script, but it doesn't feel like you're being bombarded with information.
No, because it's driving the plot on at the same time.
Exactly.
The characters are learning things that the audience need to know, or telling somebody things the audience need to know, but the plot needs them to tell each other that as well, and that's just perfect.
Looking at like IMDb, obviously I think it was obviously one screenwriter, but didn't the script for this particular film didn't it kind of go through lots of rewrites and different versions? Obviously, scripts do as part of the process. But for this film in particular, in terms of the series, didn't it kind of have a lot of like rewrites, or there are quite a few uncredited writers, I think?
I don't know. I must say, I've not looked into this too.
Amazingly enough, I don't have a fun fact about it.
No, funny thing is, I thought Greengrass was one of the sort of few changes in that, like, we talked about how it goes more shaky cam this week, which is true. But it is the same cinematographer. Do you know what I mean? Which tells you that cinematography is not just that. It's a screenplay by Tony Gilroy. But yeah, Tony Gilroy last week as well. So it's a lot of the same people. But
yeah,
I don't know whether. Well, uncredited is uncredited, isn't it? It's like you go and watch Crimson Tide and there's Tarantino dialogue in it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So you don't always know. I think we have to leave it at that because we don't know what I.
No, fair enough. I wasn't quite sure. I thought you guys might have some knowledge.
The other thing I didn't pick up on is Frank Marshall's one of the producers. Frank Marshall was a producer on the Indiana Jones film and is the husband of Kathleen Kennedy, and they were a producing team for years. Obviously, Kathleen Kennedy.
The thing is with producers, though, you don't quite know just how much involved they were.
How much influence
I think you can infer by certain names, though. If it's Frank Marshall, Kathleen Kennedy, etc., they're normally hands-on. If it's J.J. Abrams, they're normally hands-on. If it's somebody who, once, happened to see one of the director at a football match or something, maybe not. I mean, we know Batman Forever. Tim Burton was listed as a producer. He did nothing. We know that. So sometimes it's contractual. But Frank Marshall is a career producer. It's like a Robert Evans or something. I would be pretty sure he'd be hands-on. What I can't speak for is under him is Patrick Crowley and Paul L. Sandberg. That, I don't even know who they are, so I don't know.
We'll try and be more organised next time.
No, we won't.
I'll have you guys watching Anderson shows. That would be it.
I was going to say, I'll revise all the wrong stuff.
Yeah, we'll be like looking at all the wrong things and trying to find interesting fun facts.
Shall we discuss this film sequentially, folks?
Yeah.
An hour to do it.
So, so as we start off in terms of plot, one thing I should also mention, why this works. There's actually a sense of there's a conclusion to this. We established that Bourne has flashbacks of assassinating in a hotel room. If you start off, he's waking up, he has basically a dream, and this is what we kind of get into, basically his first kill, essentially. Which kind of ties into the plot, but as of to what it is, we don't know. And then we go to Berlin, don't we?
Yeah, we do go to Berlin. I mean, on that point, I do think that the point, because the film does sort of end in motion, in that part 3 is coming, and we're left in no doubt that part 3 is coming. But because we start with this flashback, it feels like an ending in and of itself.
Yeah, it's like a conclusion of
sort of like ties things up.
Yeah,
I can't remember. I think Berlin is the first scene, isn't it? Somebody working for Landy, Joan Allen's character, they're about to pay something in exchange for the Nesky files, and this is to do with some years earlier. I think it's just before the events of Identity. I don't get the impression it was generations ago. It was during the lifetime of Treadstone anyway, and it would have to be because Bourne was sent on it, and he was part of Treadstone, and we'll come to all that later. But basically, $20 million was stolen from the CIA, and they believe that the Nesky files, Nesky being, well, we'll come to who he was later, knew who did it. And what else do we want to say about that?
I would kind of put it I don't know whether to say this or not because it sounds so stupid. Like my one critique. I mean, there's a lot of glow popping in this film, but it's kind of one of those films. It's not really a critique, I guess. But you do have to pay attention because you kind of go like sort of Berlin, Moscow, Goa, New York.
It does take a while to settle down, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's probably a better way of putting it. Thank you, Dave. Sorry.
They should have done the
it's
Austin
really
Powers
good.
thing of.
You hit the ground running. Yeah, literally. And now we are to London, or now we go to China, or I mean, it's, obviously, growing up. Yeah, London, England. But it's, you get to travel the world with this film, which is not a bad thing at all. But it's one of those films where you can't just have it on in the background, and you can't even need the second one. But it just takes a while just to kind of get onto it. But you do kind of hit the ground running. So you have to be a little bit like, okay, you got to focus. Pay attention. 007, what's going on? Yeah, as I say, not really critique or criticism, I guess. But yeah, it does take a while to kind of, get in there. So. But it's good fun though, and it draws you in right from the very start for sure.
So so the point is with this is someone goes to buy the file and they're sort of killed and the file's stolen.
Yeah, we see it's well, we don't know his name really, but it's Carl Urban playing a Russian.
Yeah. Odd choice, but he kind of looks the part, and he's very slim at this point.
Yeah, and he's not really it's not really like much of a dialogue heavy role anyway.
No, he only has to speak a handful of times. It's all about, and he does sort of mean and moody. And as I say, he was young and lean at this point. I'm not saying he's fat and old now, by the way, but he was thinner.
He was known
than
for being quite buff in some of his roles, wasn't he? Though more kind of muscular and more athletic. Not that he doesn't look it here, but yeah, his physique changes throughout his career.
Yeah, so they were obviously going to buy these files, and they've been stolen. We don't know who this guy's working for at the moment. But somebody does not want those files getting into the hands of the CIA, or certainly not Landy's team anyway. And they sort of blow it up, and he puts a fingerprint on there. Yeah. To be honest, we're not told at the time, but you could guess, couldn't you? You could guess this is likely to be Bourne's fingerprint. We've got to have something to kick this film off because he's living in retirement.
Yeah, I mean, it don't waste any time anyway. If you haven't, it tells you like in fairly short amount of time what's going on. Pamela Landy investigates. They find a fingerprint, so they're like kind of like, okay, well, where's this coming up? This comes from like a CIA. It's under the CIA, but it's like high clearance. So she goes to her superior and says,
"Yeah, it's like level 5, and she isn't."
She's like, right, what I need clearance because
I need this clearance now.
Yeah. And the superior gives it to her because obviously, bear in mind, her superior isn't actually part of Treadstone. So he's not, he's not a part of it. He's not trying to like keep it. He's quiet.
got nothing. He's got nothing to cover up at all.
Yeah,
he's reluctant to give it to her, but I don't think that's a major plot point beyond just reminding us that level of clearance is difficult to get. If she'd walked in and said, "I need level 5," and he said, "You got it," it wouldn't be such a big deal. The point is, very few people can ever see that kind of information.
Yeah, it's kind of like you have to. Yeah, she made the case for it, and he's like, "Well, fair enough. You need to know this to, you need to get to the bottom of this."
And she sent to Langley to work on it directly, so she's going to be in Washington hereafter.
Yeah, which basically leads her to Brian Cox, who tells us that he's like, a week from retirement.
Is that kind of hackneyed?
Yeah.
Well, he does make a mistake here, and if I was so minded, I could blame the film for it. But human beings have weaknesses. I think what I would say is he's immediately far too defensive. I think he almost makes himself a suspect for something's amiss here.
Yeah, he's done a dodgy deal somewhere along the line, don't you? You just think
it's kind of advertising it. I mean, he's senior to her in that he's got that level of clearance she doesn't. He goes in to see her, and he's like, he kind of tries to make himself sound busy by sort of, checking his diary in inverted commas, but there's no diary.
Yeah, I'll see if I'm available. 20
And
minutes.
then 20 minutes, and he's immediately like, you're not going to nail me for this. And it's like, hang on a minute.
Hold on.
She's just coming to talk about something she knows you were involved with, but you've not actually been accused of
You're
anything.
suspicious for something.
And we don't know. They don't know at this point it was an inside job at all. So that's a bit of a weakness.
I mean, I suppose, I suppose at the time I kind of read that as kind of like him not trusting her, like sort of basically like kind of throwing shit, like, oh, right, you're just going to try to throw shit at my tenure kind of thing. You're not going to try and like nail this bullshit on me kind of thing. I mean, I suppose you might be right, but then I kind of read that as it's kind of.
I don't think it's a flaw on the film. I think if you didn't like the film and you were looking for things to like pick at, you might pick at this, because I think he's telegraphing too much here. But effectively, what happens now is it sort of goes off in that where now what's happening with who stole these Nesky files? Why is Jason Bourne involved in Pamela's head? Because they found a fingerprint, so he's come in and murdered her agent.
He's been framed.
And whoever Carl Urban works for, and we'll just call him Carl Urban, whoever Carl Urban's working for has now sent him off to clear up, to kill Bourne. So it's clear. We know it's a plant because we've seen the fingerprint put there and the evidence destroyed. But if we didn't know that, the very person who killed the agent has now gone to kill Bourne. So it's quite clear that Bourne is now going to be framed and killed before they can get to him and find it's either not true or he ends up killing anyone.
Yeah.
That's the point. And they're living a fairly simple life, beach life in India. Bourne sort of runs along the street in the morning. She sort of goes to the market, that sort of thing. He's still got his agent training in that he's subliminally and subliminally, whatever the opposite of subliminally is. He's aware of his surroundings. If something doesn't look right, he spots it immediately. Whilst running on the beach, he notices... Well, what does he notice first? He notices Carl Urban himself, doesn't he?
Yeah.
The car's wrong, the guy's wrong, he shouldn't be there.
He's dressed wrong, yeah.
Yeah, so he goes straight to Marie, and they've got to leave. And he said, "We got sloppy or lazy or whatever word he uses."
Because he thinks he's Treadstone as well. He's not thinking he's some like Russian.
He thinks it's in film terms. He thinks it's the Bourne Identity Part 2. He thinks it's literally part of the whole trying to kill him off.
Still on the hunt for him.
They're still trying to kill him off from the mission, the failed mission against Wombassi in the first film, but it's nothing to do with that.
No.
As it goes, Treadstone themselves, well, not Treadstone, but the CIA themselves have very little interest in Bourne. And in fact, the irony is, all this moving place to place, without this Treadstone plot, it wouldn't have actually been necessary. Without Brian Cox being the bad apple, no one would have been bothered Bourne at all. He would have been left alone. So they're driving away. Carl Urban's made them. He chases them. You end up with Marie driving and Jason trying to shoot. And to cut a long story short, she is killed by a stray bullet intended for Bourne. It's kind of like it's like a Range Rover van type thing, isn't it? Think the vehicles at the start of The Living Daylights. Oh,
it's kind of like a sort of Range Rover, Land Rover type thing. I think that's quite shocking, isn't it? Because I remember sort of going to see the cinema and being like, gasping audibly when it happened, and then obviously not seeing it for many, many years, and then watching it again for this and being like, oh my god, I totally forgot that she's killed off quite early on in the film.
I mean, I always felt it was kind of telegraphed. I think, you can kind of see it coming.
I wasn't paying attention.
No.
Go on, Chris. Explain how.
It's not.
No one's saying you're stupid, Becca, because you wouldn't have gone in necessarily thinking.
No,
but
it's one of those things I think you can just see coming or not. But I totally forgot, and I was just like, oh yeah, oh my god.
It's not necessarily like the film tells us this is happening. It's more of a like general reading going in, like you kind of go.
It's a trope that's expected to happen.
Yeah, you kind of think, right, okay, it's the second film, right? So Bourne's, it's kind of like
he's going to be killed off this time around.
It's kind of like a trope of
I just totally forgot. I was like, oh yeah, surprised.
Yeah, it was kind of like oh my god, she's a fembot.
I don't think the film telegraphs it. I think the very genre.
Expectations around the genre. What's going to happen?
Because Bond has gone through missions like Quantum of Solace, where he's had a woman in tow for a lot of it. But that woman, if he literally had to go through film after film with the same person, she wouldn't make it. She's not a trained agent. But Bourne can just about keep her safe for like the length of one plot of a film. But he's not going to be able to. She's not going to be able to follow him through like top level, highly trained action shit forever.
It's either going to be two things: either like she's killed off,
Yeah.
or he leaves her in the area while he goes off and does his thing. It's either going to be two things, and killing her off, quite frankly, gives this character motive.
It's the one thing the film, the rhythm section, got right, in that like we can train you to look like an agent, but to do it properly would take years. Yeah. So I was surprised, but I wasn't surprised. I think it was one of those things I hadn't really thought about.
But plus, also, she isn't much in the publicity as well.
When she was hit, I would imagine I was surprised, but then your brain kicks in, and I probably thought, well, no, that's pretty obvious, I suppose. What did you say, Chris? Sorry.
She probably wasn't in much of the publicity as well, so you kind
No,
kind of like anticipate like, oh, I wonder where she is. She's probably gonna get killed off, isn't she? Yeah.
Mind you, that doesn't always follow. We've seen how many Bond girls give loads of promotion for something they were hardly in.
Yeah, like I expected, for example. I mean, like the lady who pops up at like the first few minutes of that, like she did lots of interviews and everything, and like she's in it for 5 seconds. It's like, oh, just this is as a contrast. That's all. Anyway, moving on. Next.
The key point here is because they go into the water and Bourne sort of stays underwater for a while, probably doing his Roger Moore impression with the Gucci attire.
I did think that as well.
Carl Urban thinks he's dead, believes he's dead, and he meets up with his boss, who will find out who he's being paid off by. Let's give it away at this point. It's Brian Cox, obviously.
Yeah.
It's not so obvious on first viewing. At this point, he confirms Bourne's dead, collects his payment. Bourne is able to swim away from the scene. The one kind of moving bit is he burns all the... he has to burn all her stuff.
Yeah, his
and the
passports
one
everything.
picture that we think he keeps of her, which I wonder who takes if they're there secretly, he's got a picture of the two of them together looking happy. If you read a plot synopsis, it says he keeps that photo. At this point, that's not clear because it cuts away. There's a gap where he's looking at it, almost deciding what to do. And
I assume that he keeps it because we see it.
That's the assumption at this point. But yeah, they find the fingerprint is he travels to Italy now because he just wants to find out why am I being targeted again. And Landy's team are sort of investigating this fingerprint, and I don't understand how they find it's Jason Bourne, don't they?
So she thinks, obviously from the fingerprint, she thinks it's, at the moment she's like, well, it's identified as Jason Bourne.
So she knows it's Treadstone, which is why she's at Langley.
I'm just trying to remember which bit, 'cause it's been a while since I saw
No,
it
it's
now.
all right. I mixed up with the fact that's why she went to it, and when she's talking to Brian Cox, she knows everything about Treadstone. She's had every file given to her, so she knows, and she believed that Jason Bourne was dead. She knows about men killed in Berlin. When she said about Alexander Conklin, it's like killed in action. You can tell she doesn't believe that, but at this point, she thinks that like Bourne and Conklin might have been involved in something. Because Conklin had an unusual amount in his bank account as well. Now that doesn't mean Conklin wasn't bent. It just means he probably, if he stole money, he stole it on a different mission. You know what I mean? And that Bourne must be involved, and they're trying to sort of cover it up. And with Conklin dead, so at this point, she's not looking for Abbott. She's looking for Bourne because she assumes it's him and Conklin.
Yeah. Bourne goes to Naples.
Naples. Yeah.
And he basically is picked up by the security, isn't he? And
but he does that deliberately.
Yeah,
that's the thing. If I'd never seen this film again, and you'd said, "Tell me a couple of things about the series," like a couple of lines or images you remember, one of the first things to mind was when Julia Stiles' character says, "They don't make mistakes." He looks at the camera deliberately, and he's made because he wants to draw them out.
Yeah, because what he does, he sort of he takes them out and takes makes a copy of the SIM card so he can listen into the phone call.
Yeah,
So when they're ringing him, he's kind of like, right. So you identify as Pamela Landy, writes it down.
But he also identifies that Landy is sincere in her beliefs. She's having an open conversation about Bourne killed these guys last week,
and she's like, and he's like, right now, killed. Doesn't he? He thinks it's because something he did. He generally thinks it's something he did.
Well, he's still getting these flashbacks, so he's not quite sure. He knows it's not that because he was the wrong side of the world. He knows he didn't kill who he's purported to kill, but he doesn't understand why he's being drawn back in at all.
Yeah.
He's as I say, he's detained, and he sort of beats them up, and he's listening in. He learns her name, phone number, and that he supposedly killed someone in Berlin.
Yeah.
So she's planning to get on a plane to Europe. Abbott's trying to sort of say, don't get involved, because he's trying to save his... he doesn't want her investigating. She's clearly good. And so he heads to Germany, having these flashbacks.
And he goes to meet that's where he goes to meet that remaining Treadstone operative.
What, Nikki?
No, the
Martin Zokas' character.
Now,
because he just assumes they're killing off their Well, what does he do? It's the only other remaining Treadstone agent. I know that. I can't remember his name, but it's Martin Zokas. And he says, well, the project's shut down. And he's like, they end up having a fight, basically, and he strangles him and then basically blows the house up. But he hasn't learned really anything, has he?
No, I mean, it's funny because I always sort of, when I first saw this, I thought he kind of resembles Jordan Crabbe from Living Daylights.
Yeah, a little bit.
I was like, oh, bloody hell, he's aged well. But no.
He's got a tiny bit of like Dominic West about him as well, just a touch, but nowhere near as friendly a face. And it's just he's working his way around to ending up in the same place as these people. Abbott has gone to find Nikki. That's in Amsterdam. And Landy forces Nikki to go to Italy. And they need to capture Bourne. So basically, you do lose track of what's when. It's the intercutting that's the issue. We're probably missing scenes, but basically, Bourne goes to Berlin to find out where Pamela is registered.
And they know where Bourne is from his fight with the Treadstone agent. Yeah,
but was Munich. But they know he's in Germany, and he calls her.
Yeah,
and then says the only one I can trust is Nikki. I want to come in, and he says, "Well, what makes you think I can find her?" And he says, "Because you stood right next to her."
Mm-hmm.
So she's looking at him, but he hangs up in time. It does fall into that film trope, which isn't true. If you got 60 seconds to trace the call, which isn't true in life. Or at least it's
30 seconds, but
it's not a constant anyway. He wants to meet Nikki, and this ends up being like a train station, doesn't it? It's like a streetcar, like a tram, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's a big place in it's a public square in like a transport hub in Berlin, he basically sort of like takes Nick.
Oh, I see. Transport hub, so you can go from tram to train to. Yeah, that's why I was getting confused.
So he goes to. So he basically takes Nikki and basically interrogates her, like scares the shit out of her, puts a gun across his head.
Well, he wants to know why they're chasing him. He assumes it's Treadstone, and he knows because she's like effectively like high level admin. She's no risk to him, I suppose. But I think he is trying to sort of prompt memory as well, don't you? I think he is trying to prompt his memory, and he keeps getting this flashback, and he's seeing like a room number, and I think he's heard the name Nesky. So he finds out where that took place. He's got the room number in his memory, and he goes there. At the same time, this is where one of the people working for Landy or Abbott, I think it's Landy, just gets Abbott and takes him down to where these murders happened. and says that the charges were done in a way that, he just says basically it looks like someone's been framed. And if you hadn't been paying attention, this is where we find out Abbott is definitely guilty because he kills this guy because somebody's onto him.
Yes, because this was like his second in command, wasn't it? It was just kind of like, something's a bit.
I always assumed it was Landy's staff, but that member of Landy's staff that would make sense, because why would Landy's staff choose to talk to him? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, basically Bourne manages to get away without being caught, even though they're all watching him. He's had his conversation with Julia, who's kind of wasted in these films anyway. And he goes into the hotel and basically asks for room 645 or whatever it is. Let's say it was 645. I think it was, because I only watched it a couple of days ago. And he's told that's not available, but you can have 644. Yeah. Which is convenient, because he goes into 644 and they've actually... She's read all the files, so she's worked out that it's to do with these murders. And they know to go to 645. Because they assume something in memory has drawn him back to where he did this. And that's it. He manages to escape with it all happening sort of next door, hurts himself a little bit. Abbott calls Carl Urban's boss and says the CIA's onto us.
Yeah, and then you find out Bourne's actually there. He's taped the
conversation.
And then he
says you have to kill Bourne, otherwise this will get out. So we know this was a plot to steal $20 million. He's probably had at least a massive chunk of it, if not the majority. And he's demanded they kill Bourne, and Bourne's behind him in his hotel room. He says something like, I suppose it wouldn't help to beg, and he says it wouldn't hurt. And he basically he admits everything, and he gives him the pistol. And he says, why couldn't you leave us alone? I was halfway around the world. And then he says all the usual stuff about you can't deny your nature. That's a little bit sort of in the sort of tropes of these.
No one gets out.
Yeah, no one leaves.
But it's also, well, it's a bit rocky, isn't it? You are a fighter, So anyway, he says, I'm not going to shoot you. Marie wouldn't want that. And he shows him that he's been recording the conversation. Walks out. He's already arranged it. Landy goes in to meet him. Abbott kind of says he did it, and he calls the guy he killed collateral damage, and then shoots himself. Landy listens to the tape. She knows that Bourne is innocent, but of course Jason is still being chased by Carl Urban.
Yeah, and he's off to sort of basically find out to basically make amends with the daughter who... He
remembers the young daughter. This is I say, I think she was a younger girl. Well, she would have been younger, 6, 7, 8 years younger, whatever it was. But the point is, she looks that gives you the sort of time frame. It's a little over half a decade, little under a decade. And, but he's about to talk to her, and they notice her, and the cab driver who's taking him there gets contacted and disappears. And basically this leads into... Well, the big chase of the film, really.
Yeah, with Bourne basically starts off being injured.
Yeah, Carl Urban's about to shoot at him, but he's detained with a gun by the police. He reveals he's Secret Service, which presumably he literally is, in much the way that the highly unethical Treadstone were CIA. That gives Bourne time to get away, and it's just a sort of chase through a market, streets, a bit of a mall, a station, whatever it is. Carl Urban steals a taxi, and it's just a big chase from here, isn't it?
Yeah, he basically got the big sort of climactic car chase, which ends in quite like a bit of a crash. But surprisingly, Carl Urban survives.
That's all I want to say about it, except for it's probably the most exciting car chase that I can remember. But again, I've got to see another one next week and another one in Jason Bourne if we're talking about the Matt Damon films, because I really don't remember that Renault one till I watch it. In terms of car chases, I mean, I remember things about the film. But I do remember liking the two for the first film, and by the third film, it might be because it was the third film, I thought it was a little bit here we go again, even though I enjoyed it. But the other thing is, I read something, which I'll say now actually. When they filmed the car chase in part 3, it was on the streets of New York, and they weren't allowed to go over 30 miles an hour, and they edited around it. And with that knowledge, I went in with that knowledge because it was in like Empire magazine or whatever. So I think I was seeing it through that prism. Watching this film today, I don't think they were going that quickly. I think it is careful editing that does the work. And I didn't find it as exciting. I think what I find most exciting about it is two things. Firstly, Jason is injured. So you're almost wondering if his like conscience or his consciousness or his left leg or whatever it is he's been shot in or his shoulder's gonna hold up. And it's the crash at the end where Urban crashes his car. That's a massive impact, or it feels a massive impact. So it's really crunching. You know, it's this film almost that killed Bond retrospectively, because I don't think Identity did it, but you get to here we're a few months from Brosnan being let go, and you're just like, yeah, this is like film with consequences in pain and blood within the PG-13 rating. I really did find this quite incredible. But he does get out. I mean, we're selling a really good chase very short, but how much can you say about two cars chasing each other? The crash is the big thing. Urban's badly injured. Damon sort of gets away.
Yeah.
His boss, Thingy's boss is Urban's boss is arrested because Landy's given them the evidence, and Bourne goes to find the daughter, Neski. He's holding a gun, but she's scared, but I don't know why he's got the gun like that, but
yeah, you walk in thinking like,
don't be scared.
Don't
guy covered in blood pointing a gun at you.
Yeah, telling you that he's the one who killed your parents. Oh, great.
But don't be scared if you got any ice cream. You know, he says that. I know he says that she's older than he thought she'd be. He doesn't know how long it's been. But the full flashback was it wasn't it wasn't like the first film with the training mission. He was there to cover Brian Cox's tracks. Basically, they knew what had been done. The money had been stolen, and that's it really. Bourne, she cries, and Bourne quietly leaves.
I can't help but think he's probably just traumatized this poor girl.
Probably.
You know, just for like,
you can't imagine him leaving thinking, well, that's my good deed done for the day.
You know, I mean, I get that, you know, it's like, you know, act of confession and he needs to get it off his chest and that. Like,
it's for his benefit, not hers.
Yeah.
It's like the drunk, you know, like making amends to the wife he used to beat up or something, and it's like, you just reminded her, mate. Deal with your own guilt. So yeah, now that's kind of the end of the film, and our reason I say that is we'll find out next week that the final scene in this is actually 2/3 of the way through the Bourne Ultimatum. Bourne rings Landy to just say why were they still looking for him. Landy, you know, talks to him about supplying the tape. They've certainly settled it. She apologizes. It's off the record, and then she just says David Webb, and he was born 18 months later than the Jason Bourne incarnation. Jason Bourne's slightly older than Matt Damon. David Webb is slightly younger. She says, come in and talk, and says, get some rest, you look tired. And she looks out the window. It turns out he was there.
He's in New York all along, and we'll find out, which is halfway point of the next film.
But we don't, you know, in some respects, you don't really need, that doesn't matter. If you chose not to watch the third film, you don't lose anything. It is an ending from this. It could have been 5 minutes afterwards. It wouldn't have been New York, probably. But that's it. And that's it. And I think all I really want to say about the film as my final thoughts is to echo what I said at the start. I now believe this to be the stronger film out of the first two, which I find odd with it not having a definitive ending. But then I suppose The Empire Strikes Back's my favourite Star Wars film, so that can happen. I think the plotting's a bit more intelligent. I think the fact that he has some memory but doesn't have all of it is actually to the film's benefit. I don't think the third film is as well paced as the second. So from memory, it went 1, 2, 3 before, and it now goes 2, 1, 3. But we'll challenge that next week. Terrific. Doesn't quite stand alone, but it's probably at the moment in my head the best part of the opening 3 films. What about you guys?
Yeah, so for me, I'm obviously a big fan of this series. I think it sort of reinvigorated action thriller, spy thriller genre. I think without it, perhaps we might not have had the Bond reboot that we did a few years down the line. First film, hugely influential. But I think this is probably one of those. Obviously, really enjoyed the first one, but really enjoyed this one as well. It kind of hits the ground running and doesn't really let up. I think this is one of those few examples of where not that the first film was bad, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it's one of those ones that the sequel is a bit better. That for me, kind of that rarely happens. But for me, this is like one of those sort of rare examples, really. A sequel that kind of seems to outdo the original or improves upon it. But no, I had a great time with this one. And no, I totally agree for sure. But to be honest, I cannot remember. Again, I think I kind of with the series, I saw the first three, and then I just missed out on the follow-up films, and I didn't see the TV spin-off, unfortunately. I think it was only cancelled after one series or something along those lines. So it does kind of get a little bit hazy for me. So this is all good for revisiting them on this show. But no, for me, I enjoyed the first film, really enjoyed this one. No let up from it, but it seems to tie everything up, obviously, because when we come to the third film, they're a little bit like, right, how do we build on this? But no, it's kind of good to sort of tie everything off. Central performances are fantastic. Joan Allen is brilliant. Like, she doesn't, she just kicks ass left, right, and centre. Doesn't let up. Really determined. Doesn't put up with anybody's bullshit. Carl Urban, great in his, before he was famous type role. I think he's kind of known as more quite a physical actor. We see a little bit of it here as well. Michelle Monaghan as well. As you said at the top of the show, a bit kind of Gerard Butler with a kind of almost cameo, but she get a little bit of screen time here. But it's amazing how quickly her star rises in the years after this film. Julia Stiles, fantastic. And she, as I mentioned, she is kind of known for a lot of these teen roles, those teen romantic sort of roles, sort of very chick flick type roles, and then sort of progressed to kind of more serious drama and TV as well. I think she was in a series called Riviera a couple of years ago now.
You're talking about Joan Allen?
No, Julia Stiles now.
Oh,
sorry.
I was.
No, that's okay. Joan Allen, she's great in this film. I think this something as well that this film.
It was also Pat Nixon in Nixon. That's where.
As having like really strong female leads as well. That's something that I think perhaps this series certainly isn't. It's something that's perhaps forgotten, I guess, about this film. I mean, Frank Potente, obviously, Joan Allen's fantastic. Julia Stiles as well. But I think it's quite interesting how she was kind of known. This is why I sort of mentioned a film called The Cry of the Owl, which is a remake of maybe 60s or 70s or 80s even, French adaptation of the original Patricia Highsmith novel, which is one of my favourite books of all time. It's a like twisty-turny psychological thriller-ish kind of drama, kind of, it meshes up all the genres, as she is wont to do. And I thought with Julia Stiles, for example, she's known for kind of these really strong independent women, and then for her to come along in that kind of role as somebody who's kind of perhaps a bit more emotional, a bit wishy-washy, just kind of really, and again to show her in this, just really shows her talents as an actor for sure. Brian Cox, I forgot his name there for a minute. Also really good in this. He's kind of slippery, quite slimy. You kind of know he's obviously made a deal with the devil somewhere along the line, and you think, oh, why is he being so defensive? Well, he's actually, he's not, he's quite a naughty boy in this film, quite naughty, shall we say. But yeah, it's just really, really solid, like solid action, solid stunts as well, amazing like foot chases, car chases, doesn't really let up. So yeah, this is one of those sequels that's firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit of a step up. I mean, this film actually kind of made, I want to say Green Gas more, not a household name, but kind of made him more of an established director. Because he would go on to do not only like the Bourne stuff, but also Captain Phillips and films like that.
Captain Phillips is superb.
Excellent, really excellent.
But yeah, and also United.
United 93.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that was the kind of
Green
thing
Room
that did kind of cement that shaky cam.
Green
aspect.
Room is the other one to mind. No, not Green. Was it called Green Room? Green something.
Green Zone,
Green Zone,
yeah.
That was it.
Which he kind of has like a documentary kind of style to drama.
That's very handheld style, isn't it?
This kind of feels like the series finds its footing. It's a lot more confident. It's got a plot that is more accessible to most people, I think. And yeah, it just sort of cements like Matt Damon as Jason Bourne in their kind of action spy role. So I don't think there's much more to say that's not been said really, other than I don't think I know too much about this film. Do you, Dave?
No, I will say, don't bother with News of the World. It got Oscar nominated, the Tom Hanks film about it was the same guy Jason Robards plays in All the President's Men is played by Tom Hanks in News of the World. I think I can't remember much of the detail now, but it's not
I've
very
seen
good.
that for a long time.
It's not very good. But anyway, I was just changing the subject, Chris, there because I'm a bit embarrassed. Oh God, how do I say this, Chris? I don't know anything about this. It's all right for you admitting it.
No, neither do I.
You basically just skimmed off Wikipedia, didn't you?
I'm older. That's the thing. I'm the oldest of the three of us. I'm supposed to be like gently guiding you guys through.
Not by that much though.
No, but not by that much. But guilt weighs heavy on me, Becca. Can you help?
No.
Fair enough.
No. Well, yeah, that kind of put me on the spot with the Anderson thing. I was like, dates, times, I've only got about 4 fun facts for you this week, so I had real trouble just trying to find out. And also I had like 10 minutes to crib, so I was like, quick, what can I find? So obviously, as we discussed, not really a fun fact. But yeah, obviously, Greengrass used many of sort of handheld cameras to really achieve that kind of gritty, realistic effect. Lots of obviously all the action and the stunts are kind of done in camera as much as possible. Very minimal CGI, maybe a little bit here and there, but it was trying to do it pretty much for real practical effects as much as he could. And I think this, and as you mentioned, in 1993, and you know other sort of films he's known for very much for that sort of what's now dubbed shaky cam, but doesn't really do it justice really. And obviously that would go on to impact arguably Casino Royale when we got the Bond reboot a few years later in 2006. Fun fact number 2, apparently all the events in the film were kind of shot in the reverse order of location. For example, like the Moscow scenes were shot first and the scenes in India were shot last, which I think is quite interesting. Fun fact number 3, this is a bit of a long one. Let's have a look. So yeah, not surprisingly, Doug Liman was replaced as director with the Bourne Supremacy and the Bourne Ultimatum, but at the 11th hour was still scrambling. Left open for the film franchise. Paul Greengrass obviously had a meeting with Matt Damon, and the two came up with a new ending for the third film, for the second film. And they also received permission to shoot it, and it would cost $200,000. Obviously, Matt Damon was filming Ocean's 12 at the time, so he had to kind of leave that early to go and do this one. And then it was only 2 weeks before the films came out in America. So
when did you film Team America then? Because he was brilliant at
when did
that.
he do that in between?
Yeah.
He obviously didn't. I don't think he did a voice for that one, did he? I think.
No. Do you know what they did?
They
didn't intend to like portray him as thick. What happened?
No,
was
I think it was the way
the marionette came back looking. Yeah, the marionette came looking like that, and they went, "Oh, let's just lean into
Let's
it."
just leave him out." And yeah, because I can't remember if he actually did a voice in it or not. That wasn't his. He might have had another character's voice. Yeah. So that's not even how we got talking about puppets. Oh my god! If we ever do like South Park or whatever, then we're gonna have to do it because it's hilarious. But yeah, I think his puppet was kind of sculpted, and he did look a little bit.
Yeah, something went wrong, and it came out looking a bit. It came out looking special.
How he did, and he was like Matt Damon, and then that's how that was born. But obviously now hugely offensive, so I really apologise for that. Yeah, fun fact number 4 today. I don't have 5. I'll try again next week. When this film was being made, obviously there's no intention of another sequel, so they tried to wrap everything up in a nice little package. So obviously when it came out,
nice Simpsons quote.
Yeah, this is a package. And I think that was on the other day. So yeah, obviously when the third film comes around, they kind of had to work out, how they're going to make around for that one. So that's my really rubbish 4 fun facts that aren't even remotely fun. So sorry about that, folks. So I'll try again next week, and also try not to slow things down by going on a tangent for an hour.
Fun fact, Becca really does enjoy Thunderbirds.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Go and listen to that Jerry Anderson podcast. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Basically, that and Bond are 2 favourite things.
And anime as well.
And
Dun,
anime,
dun,
yes.
dun,
And literature.
dun, 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 dun.
And music and art.
Yeah, but that's all vague, isn't it? Literature.
And dogs.
I mean,
And
specific
pets and
properties.
animals. What else do I enjoy? I want to try and get out my bike at some point. That might be nice. Especially now the weather's getting nicer.
Becca likes
Yes.
riding.
No, thank you very much.
Anyway,
I want to ride my bike. It's what I
are
want
we
to
all
do.
like finished?
Bicycle.
We finished.
Yes,
with
I'm
the
finished
facts?
now with my fun facts, thank you.
As for social media, you can find me at the Pastor Kid 1976 on Twitter.
Hey, you can find me on Cinema Talks. You can also find all your episodes on Podbean, which is on cinematalks.co.uk as well. You can find all of them there.
You can find us, Do You Expect Us to Talk, on Facebook. Just type in Do You Expect Us to Talk. On Twitter, we are at Expect Us to Talk. Also on YouTube, Do You Expect Us to Talk? We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, anywhere you like to get us podcasts. Wherever you are, what platform you're on, please do give us a lovely rating, preferably 5 stars, and a nice review. That helps us to attract more listeners and helps us to go higher in the ratings.
Although I think that it reminds me Angus Deaton years ago, the guy who used to present Have I Got News For You and that. He won Best Newcomer 15 years into his career. If we suddenly take off now, it's getting a bit late in the day, really, isn't it?
We have been going for a while now, haven't we? So I think as us, because we started around the same time as JBR.
Yeah, they were a few months ahead of us.
Yeah,
But we've done a few more episodes now.
we have. Yes, moving on. Well, they are on a bit of a break.
They are on a bit of a break. Up to see them back soon. I mean, they're not the podcast I would ever do. Otherwise, I would have done it. But
We're all different, aren't we? We're all
I
different.
do very much respect what they do. I do.
We're all different. I think it's also we started out with
every
Bond and we've moved on
property-
to other series. So.
Every property needs its fan cast, and do you know what I mean? And I think they're the fan cast, and I love that they exist.
Yeah, definitely. It was. I think certainly for me anyway, they're one of like the biggest influences. I think what was it? Now playing JBR, a few others.
Yeah, no.
How did this get made?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I still count it as upon as one of our sort of biggest influences, definitely. And I think we're still doing. Still in touch with loads of people from JBR, definitely. Tom, Chris, and like for example, this is like the 3-year. This week was our 3-year anniversary since the Majesty's 50 trip to Fitzroy in 2019. So we were just like, oh, do you remember this or do you remember that? Or it's first time meeting.
It's created a community as well.
Well, it has,
So,
yeah. Community is growing up around it. So like we've got lots of lovely listeners who enjoy listening to us whenever we put our show out. But yeah, it's created a really nice sort of community around it. And the same with other podcasts that you listen to as well. I mean, there's like Kermode and Mayo. They've left the BBC and branched out on their own with their own Kermode and Mayo take. And there's the community they built up around Entertainment has now followed them over to the new one. Any podcast I think like that, there's a fan community around it, which I think is just it's so nice. Especially after the last couple of years, we've all been quite sort of divided and isolated, and it kind of brings everyone together. So no.
Yeah, it's great to respect your listeners. So that's it. Fuck off.
Screw you. No.
So what's next, Becca?
Yes, Do You Expect Us to Talk will return with the Bourne Ultimatum.